All right. Howdy and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. I am Will Stone. He is Chase Caldwell.
I'm Chase Caldwell.
I was waiting on you to change your video. um, we're back. It's been a minute. I'm sure you guys have missed us. We've missed y'all. Just been a little bit busy with vacations and COVID and just your normal summer stuff. So
Yeah,
it's good to be
I
back.
I I had COVID for the third time, um, so I'm a veteran at this point. You know, it was nothing this time around. It was
Yeah.
only like 2 or 3 days, but um, yeah, been busy vacationing it a little bit. I went down to Fredericksburg and got to see my family
Great
down
place.
there. Highly recommended. Highly recommended. Not right now. Not when it's 117 degrees all over the state of Texas. Because
Yeah.
if there's one thing about the hill country is it gets hotter than everywhere else.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, we got Hayden watching live.
hey Hayden, welcome. Um, yeah, so lots been going on over the past few weeks. Of course, we're in the height of SEC media days, so that's the topic of conversation. But with all the realignment craziness that have gone on since the last time we recorded, of course, that's something that we got to talk about too. So, um,
Yeah, I mean the stuff with realignment, like that's going to change, you know, the entire future of the sport that we talk about on this podcast. So,
yeah. Oh, I mean, it already has. I mean,
it already
there's no
has.
going
Yeah,
back at this point. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Um,
we're definitely going to spend the majority of our time there. But I guess here at the beginning, SEC Media Days wrapped up today. Jimbo spoke today. He was the last coach to go. I was able to catch it live. I was going over some uh, notes with Chase before he hopped on, but pretty standard stuff. Didn't give too much away. Obviously, asked about the quarterbacks. Said it's good to have three guys, which you know they mentioned that they needed three last year with when Haynes went down and Calzada. He said he had to pop his shoulder back into place whenever we played Auburn, and
yeah.
it's just an incredible toughness right there. But the only two things that really stood out were his confidence in the offensive line, which I tend to agree with him there. Also, I think he may have let it slip that Moko is going to be the starting left guard. I mean, it's going to be a competition, but um, I don't think he meant to say Moko's name, and he let it slip a little bit. So, um, and I think most importantly is he feels as good right now about the program and the place that it's in and where it's going than he has the entire time that he's been here. So I tend to agree with that as well. And we talked about that on our last show about the state of the program. I mean, you really do have depth, at every spot. There's competition with elite athletes at every spot, and that's a coach's dream.
Yeah, it is. I think we're we have every right to be excited with the talent that we have, the depth that we have everywhere. Just got to see it on the field. We
Yeah,
we need to turn that corner. Um, I'm confident that this is a year that we can do that. But um, it's making me get more and more excited for football season. There's no doubt about it.
yeah. I mean, it's 6 weeks from Saturday is A&M's first game, and there's games before that, so we're gonna have college football here pretty quickly. I think even the first NFL preseason game is in like 2 weeks. I think something like that, the Hall of Fame game. So football will be on your television in short order, and
Short order.
that's all we can hope for at this point. But
Yeah.
um, one thing I noticed, I didn't listen to I didn't listen to hardly any of the coaches. I got some of the highlights through Twitter and other sources throughout the week, but it seems like this is kind of a doubt A&M year. Like there's certain years where A&M is kind of hyped up a little bit and is favored somewhat, and other years people are like, well, I just don't see it, like and kind of down us a bit, which we talked last night, Chase. I prefer it that way.
Yeah, I don't know if doubt's the right word. It's more of like dog on A&M. I, the I think I think everybody always doubts A&M, to be
Yeah,
quite
that's
frank.
true.
And
Yeah,
there's a lot of times like this time of year where there's more doubt out there about our team, and the excitement that you get is really from just Aggies. Um, and I would say that we probably have some blissful ignorance, more times than not, at least looking into history. Um, of course, this year's different, but it's this year. It's everything is really more than I can remember in years past, where it's negative press. Like they're really, you think about all the stuff with NIL primarily is what we're talking about. But we signed the best class in history, and we had a little 15 minutes of fame after that where everybody's talking about us doing that. And then, of course, it evolved into the monster of, um, the
30
coaches
$30 million
saying stuff, $30
and
million, sliced bread, all that kind of stuff that, um, I don't know, it just, to me, it seems a little bit unwarranted. But there again, I mean, it goes to show that there's a lot of frustration in college football surrounding NIL, and we're one of the beneficiaries of NIL, and um, that's why we feel that way. Because I mean, they're probably saying it about other teams too, and we just don't notice it because it's not our team, so we're not paying as much attention to it. But
right.
it does seem, just overall, just narrowing it down to the SEC. I'm not talking about overall college football. I'm just narrowing it down to the SEC. I don't know of another team that they're really dogging on as much as they are A&M. like
Yeah.
South Carolina and Shane Beamer, like they've just really been, hyping him up and all of that, which I'm for. I mean, he seems like a good guy, good coach, and um, not putting that down, but you look at him and he's having fun, and then you look at A&M and it's all about Jimbo and Saban,
Yeah.
and I feel like Jimbo fielded more of that than Saban did, but you
Well,
know,
and like SEC media days it's usually in Birmingham, and thank God it was at least in Atlanta this year, but still a very heavy Alabama presence with
mhm.
Alabama media people. But the first two questions were from Alabama journalists, and one of the guys was like, he asked Jimbo, he said, "Do you feel like you owe Nick Saban an apology?" And I just shook my head. I'm like, "Come on, guys! Like this whole spat was like 2 months ago, and yeah, it was intense and it was fiery at that point, but um, both of them seem to be over it, and they both said that this week that it's in the past and still respect each other and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, but uh, as far as a team that's getting a lot of hype, I know you brought up South Carolina.
Mhm.
Everyone seems to still be all in on Arkansas, and I kind of get it. Like they had a really good year last year. They did beat A&M. So props to them for that. They did lose a lot, but I think I think the way these things work every year is if your quarterback is coming back, you're going to get if you have a good quarterback coming back, you're probably going to get the benefit of the doubt more so than a team like A&M. Even though we have a lot more talent, um, we haven't seen we still don't know who the starter is going to be for one. And if it's
Mhm.
King, we've barely seen him. If it's Connor, we've never seen him. So I think and plus you combine that with a disappointing record last season, it just doesn't set you up well for what they call talking season in the summer
Yeah.
months.
Well, it's I don't know. We've been there, done that with the whole quarterback competition piece, and um, I'm sure media personnel get tired of doing that because they do it with at least half the teams every single year.
Yeah,
Um, we've given them put it on a silver platter of here's something different that you can talk about because our coach held a press conference to chew out another coach. So
He
so
said
I
he ought to
mean,
be slapped.
yeah, that being said, I do like dislike pointed questions, and
Yeah,
even whether it's even when people make pointed questions in favor of A&M, I just hate them in general because it's like, I don't know, it's dumb.
yeah.
Um,
There's
I
one.
mentioned this when we were talking, but somebody asked Saban if he turned off the rain because it stopped raining right as he got on stage, like,
Yeah,
insinuating that he's God and that he can control the weather,
yeah.
and that just it's odd. Like
Well,
I
there's another one that we talked about on the phone last night that we won't talk about here because we don't want to put any media personalities on blast. So,
right, yeah.
but but
I will say probably just to make mention of it. One of the cooler things that I witnessed. I watched Mike Leach because anytime he's on the microphone, I'm going to watch it.
oh yeah, you
Um,
have to.
but Kirk Bowles from the Austin American Statesman, he I like that guy a lot. He's a Longhorn guy, beat writer, and I follow him on Twitter. Like he's just a good reporter, one that I really enjoy um, following his stuff. And he was there, and um, he asked Leach about something about what he thought about Texas and OU coming into the program and stuff. But what was neat to me um, was he gets up there, hey, Kirk Bowles, Austin American Statesman, and Leach was like, hey, good to see you again. Like you could tell that Leach truly remembered him from his
Oh
time at
yeah,
Texas Tech,
oh
which
yeah,
I think is neat, because there is that play where those it's the same 10 people in the room at all the press conferences, but
yeah,
to have, like, that'd be like if if you know Saban or somebody went to another conference for 10 years and then came back, and Billy Lucci stands up and, hey, Billy Lucci, texags.com, and hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in a long time. Good to see you again. So that was kind of neat to see
yeah.
that. But um, Leach, Leach, I don't know if he's as funny as I think he is, but anything he says, I find it hilarious. But he's just his mannerisms and the way he goes about addressing things is always just so
No,
funny to me.
he's such a funny guy. I can't wait for Oklahoma to have to play in Starkville when he's the head coach, or even Texas. Like,
Yeah.
we're like, damn it, we've already been through this before.
Uh,
um, but I guess the last little comment I'll make on media days. I mean, per usual, nothing groundbreaking coming out of media days. It's all pretty standard stuff. A lot of coach speak, but um, one thing that Saban mentioned was two of the starting corners, two starting cornerbacks at Alabama, have been hurt all summer, haven't participated in any uh, you know weightlifting or training or stuff like that, and their status is kind of uh, to be determined for the season. Like, I'm sure they'll play, but maybe still nursing some injuries. That's one thing that you know we don't really take for granted, but it's always it's impossible to predict. You don't know who's going to get hurt, but like um, that seems significant to me. Like, and it's Alabama. They probably got. I mean, of the two guys hurt, they still have Elias Ricks healthy, who's probably a first round pick at corner.
mhm.
They're still going to be fine, but from a depth standpoint, that kind of hurt them last season at the end of the year when they had some injuries. Um, and from an A&M standpoint, last summer, um, you know, a lot of the things we were talking about was, well, if Luke Matthews is healthy, then that helps our outlook. If Baylor Cup is healthy, if Caleb Chapman and Demas are healthy, And none of those guys really were. Like Demas, out of that group played the most, but he was banged up all of fall camp. Miles Jones played one play and basically missed the entire season. So um, I feel pretty good about where A&M is at right now in terms of injuries. And I'm going to knock on some wood right here, but I hope that stays the same way through fall camp. But I don't know. It's just something that was on my mind after listening to Saban.
Yeah. Injuries can decimate a team very quickly. Even Alabama, they're not immune to that. No matter how good they are, they can still have a pretty significant impact on their team. I would even argue to say, if you look at the talent of our team last year and how much we did have, the injury bug hit us enough that it did impact our season quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
With Bama, is it going to make them go 6-6? No, but it may be the catalyst to have them drop a game or two because they're dealing with injuries at needed positions.
Yeah.
Obviously, corner is a very needed position in today's SEC. So I don't know. I mean, I don't ever hope for anybody to get hurt by any means, and I know that's not what you meant, but yeah, I mean, it could be a significant thing. It could be something that is the defining line between, the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess you could say, on whether they win all their games or drop one or two.
Yeah.
So
that's why depth is so important. Like, if the starting QB for A&M gets hurt this year, we won't have that much of a drop off. I don't think, to the second guy, even the third guy. We have a third guy that's viable. If things come down to it. And this freshman class is so talented. If those guys aren't starting, they could easily get their shot if one of the starters goes down, and they may. If they get that spot, they may never give it up because they're so talented. But that's really all I've got on SEC Media Days. If you want to go and kick it on over to Realignment.
Yeah, we can. I'll answer Hayden's question first. He wanted to know the best Leach quote. I think for sure this time around the best Leach quote was somebody asked him about what Texas and OU coming into the league will look like.
I was hoping you'd say this.
He basically said, well, I mean, if you were to take like two of the teams that we have that we're currently playing and you replace them with Texas and OU, it pretty much just gives us like a half a step ahead.
It makes our schedule easier.
In other words, it makes the schedule easier. So that was pretty funny.
That's good stuff.
Unfiltered.
Well, yeah. So this isn't really news at this point. It's several weeks old, at least 3 or 4 weeks old. But initial reaction when you logged on to Twitter.com. Actually, I think me, you, and Hayden were probably in a group text, and we were talking like, "Hey, USC and UCLA are going. Like they're leaving the Pac-12. They're going to the Big Ten. Like it got announced. It leaked today, and it's already going to be a done deal by tonight. Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like what was your initial reaction to that?
I don't fully understand it. My reaction was kind of like, well, obviously like, oh, that's a big deal. That's going to really change the landscape of college football. But it was also a bit more of confusion too in it, because I mean, you think about the players' pads and helmets and all the stuff that go on the truck. That truck, they're going to have to load all of their equipment up on like Tuesday to get it there on time for, of course the players and all them are flying, but the logistics of it to me was my first thought was, how in the world is that going to work? You go from USC all the way to Ohio State to play a game, and then turn around and come home. That just seems. I mean, I know that we've gotten away from geographic football, and it's become more of a national landscape,
Yeah.
um, but logistically speaking, I don't see how you could do that in
Yeah.
season. I get how you can do it recruiting wise and all of that.
Oh
I
yeah.
get the I get the appeal from USC and UCLA to want to join. I get why they were the teams that you would want. I understand all of that part of it. Um, but that's a big. I mean, two polar opposite sides of the U.S. And now you're hearing more and more talk about the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Kind of teaming up, and maybe the Pac-12 and the ACC teaming up. Same deal. Like you're covering a lot of ground doing that.
Yeah. Let's pair up the Pacific Coast Conference and the Atlantic Coast Conference
Yeah, it's
that are 3 time zones apart. That makes perfect sense.
so really to me is kind of a symbol of almost desperation. Desperation's maybe a harsh word for it, but um, it just to me, they're bound to have thought about it behind the scenes. There's bound to be a lot more of it that goes into it that we don't know about, but um, it just doesn't seem very thought through. It seems more of like a knee jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we need to tie our horse to this wagon before we get left behind. But
Yeah. Well, and
you wouldn't get left behind if you didn't make the change to begin with. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, on top of the you know equipment logistics, like what about softball and volleyball and lacrosse or like whatever else, like
Yeah,
swimming and diving? Like
right.
these kids are going to have to go, uh, and miss a lot more class to travel, further. And I know why they did it. Obviously, it's money. Um,
Hmm.
like football is the biggest driver in money, and USC and UCLA wanted to uh, be a part of that. I think in the future, like in the very near future, um, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to make probably more than double what other conferences will for, as a like on a per school basis. It'll probably be more than it will be more than double. It'll be uh, it's going to be insane, the disparity. We talk about parity all the time. There's going to be a huge
Hmm.
gap between those two conferences and everybody else. Um,
Yeah.
it may not be as big as what currently is from Power Five to G5, but I don't know, man. I I'll be honest. I hate it for the sport. Like I like it the way it is. I liked it. I wish uh, Texas and OU would have stayed where they were. And
Hmm.
honestly, I mean, I talk about relegation a lot. Um, that was a really fun model for uh, the conferences we used to have. Like there were 5 Power 5, 5 G5. They were all pretty geographically, connected. Um, and you could have done, hey, worst team in the Big 12, you have to go to Conference USA now. Conference USA champ, you come to the Big 12 now. Um,
Yeah.
and that to me is more exciting than, I mean, listen, I'm still going to watch. It's college football. It's my favorite sport. I'm still going to watch, when it's USC versus Minnesota or whoever, on their Big Ten schedule. I'm probably going to watch it because it's going to be entertaining. But um, what I hate the most is for teams like Washington State and Oregon State. Um, it's hard to see a path where they don't get completely screwed. Um, but now I don't really know because like Oregon and Washington applied for the Big Ten. The Big Ten said, "Hey, we're good." So um, I think when it initially came out, people kind of jumped to the conclusion that, hey, long term, we're going to have two super leagues of like 20 plus teams, the Big Ten and SEC, and, that's going to be that. Um, I don't know what I like. That makes sense. I don't know what it's going to be like. I think we're still waiting on Notre Dame to decide what they want to do. They seem pretty content to remain independent. Um, they make a lot of money from NBC. In case people don't know that, in case people are wondering why they're not joining the conference, it's because they have all their home games are on NBC, and they get, it's like the Longhorn Network, but it's not kind of thing. Like it actually makes money. Um, so I don't know if they're going to be enticed to join the Big Ten. And they, for whatever reason, they seem content to be independent. That's kind of their shtick, is to remain
Yeah.
independent. So I don't know. I feel like I
And
rambled a lot there.
I have dogged on. I mean, of course, I can't stand Notre Dame, but I've dogged on them being independent for as long as I can remember. I've always thought it was stupid. They may end up being in the better position now, moving forward by being independent than to be tied to any of these other three conferences, the ACC, Pac-12, and the Big 12. Just because you're right, it's going to. I don't see a time that we go to super conferences, mega conferences, whatever you want to call them. Um, I know that that's kind of the popular idea. I don't see it actually happening. What instead I see happening is we're gonna cherry pick all the biggest teams and the halves, and we're all gonna just go sequester ourselves over here, and then let the kids play.
Yeah.
And so I ultimately I don't think it's all that great for the sport, and I know it can be argued that A&M and Mizzou started it, and it can also be argued that
Yeah.
Colorado and Nebraska started it and all that. I get that.
Arkansas
That's
and South
not that's
Carolina started it back in
that's not the
'91.
point. And honestly, I'm not even putting down Texas and OU for coming to the SEC. I don't blame them for that. That's still regional. USC and the Big Ten, that seemed like more of a, if the Big 12 is going to do it, or if the SEC is going to do it, we're going to do it. And that's I get it. You got to survive. You got to um, look out for your conference and all that. But I think what I'm I think we have two of perhaps the most monumental changes happening to the sport of college football going on at the exact same time, and that's a little bit worrisome. That's a little bit worrisome on like the future of the sport. Is there going to be complications, because you got all this realignment that's a huge change to college football. You also have NIL, that's a huge change to college football. And in both situations, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. There's no rules. It's just every man for himself. And with both of that going on, which one do you tackle first? Do you fix realignment and then figure out NIL, or do you figure out NIL and then work on realignment? By then, some of your other leagues might be decimated.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I'm not sure if some of our more casual listeners understand, like, why is everything so chaotic in college football when the NFL has uh, a lot less um, a lot less drama. Like
yeah.
you don't see this kind of stuff happening uh in the NFL. It's because the NFL runs that whole thing. Um,
Hmm.
like they like, yeah, there's an NFC and AFC, but they all belong to the NFL. They make the rules. Um, and there's only 32 teams. Uh, in college football, you have 10 conferences that are all looking out for their own best interest, and two of those conferences kind of hold all the cards right now. And
Yeah.
I just like, there's no like, yeah, there's the NCAA, which is toothless. Um, there's no governing body. There's no person in charge to say, hey, you can't do this, or hey, it should be this way. Um, it's kind of just like it's just running amok right now, and
Mhm.
there's really nothing that you can do to stop that. I think I think what needs to happen, and I don't know, like this would set some other things up to be done, but I think football needs to break apart from the NCAA, and like basketball, baseball, all that stuff, all that can stay. That's fine. It's it doesn't make money anyway. It can stay where it is. But for college football, the money making machine that it is, it needs to be governed a little bit differently, and maybe a lot of bit differently than the other
Mhm.
sports, and like maybe put that in its own thing. Um, I don't know if you have like a board or something in charge of it, but the way things are right now, it's not sustainable. I don't think. To I think it's inevitable at this point that football does break away. And I think it'll be better off for it.
I think it will too. And here's the silver lining of this, right? Because whenever we talked about um, the Longhorns and OU coming to the SEC, I talked a good length about um, the Baylor's and Texas Tech's, Oklahoma State. What's going to happen with all of those teams? Um, and 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 that's again how I feel about the Pac-12 right now. That's how I feel about all of college football right now. The Big 12, they went out and grabbed a handful of teams to try and make up for their loss. But um, so for us as college football fans, our reaction, of course, is oh man, what about these smaller teams? Now it's just going to be the big teams, and that's it. You got the SEC and the Big Ten. That's it, and that kind of kills the fun of it and the joy of college football and all that. But just to be devil's advocate, and again to kind of give a little bit of a silver lining, look at the history. I mean, look at the past 10 years, let's say, of college football. What has what has come about with these smaller teams? Well, they become more and more popular. You see UCF, and a lot of people really pitching for them to be national champions.
Yeah. Cincinnati.
Houston's done it good. Cincinnati, um, these smaller teams. Everybody likes an underdog story. Everybody likes these smaller. But then you look at the bowls and how out of hand they got, and out of hand in terms of it started with a handful of bowls, and then now there's more bowl games than there are college football teams. It seems like.
And there are teams that can
Um,
qualify.
well, why is that? It's because college football fans are desperate for more and more college football. So what our fears are is that there's going to be less college football, but the market's going to drive itself. Look, you had the was he the number one pick or the number two pick, or I'm sorry, not pick, but recruit going to an HBCU,
Oh
and
yeah.
Deion Sanders going down there and that kind of thing. That's becoming more popular. These smaller schools that maybe they're not in the SEC, maybe they're not in the Big Ten, but people are following what's going on over there,
Yeah.
and so I think my initial reaction to it is, oh, this isn't good for the sport, but maybe it is. It may prove me wrong. This might be one of those old man yells at clouds situations where we're accustomed to what we're accustomed to, which is a broken system as it is. We got 5 conferences vying for 4 spots, and they're all public schools. It's all politicians running who's in what conference, and they're just looking out for their own alma mater and that kind of thing. And I mean, it's kind of, when you get really into the nitty gritty of it, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, well, there wasn't a championship game until like the 90s.
Yeah.
That's weird, in a competition sport. That's odd. So there's that whole idea that I think inevitably, if you're ESPN, if you're NBC, if you're any of these news networks, what are you going to
Fox.
do with all these smaller schools? Um, you're gonna go out and try to get them, because if if you go from having 5 power conferences that have games all across the board to now suddenly you have 2 with 16 teams, what happened to all the other games? You're gonna have a
Yeah.
lot of empty airtime, you know. So um, I, I know it's all driven by money, but I expect that the pendulum will kind of swing back the other way after we get a taste of what it looks like. And that's the thing, is it's all theoretical right now. I mean, I know it's going to actually happen. I'm not saying it's not going to actually happen, but we're talking about, you know, Texas and OU not moving to the conference for 3 more years, and you know, the other teams coming in the Big 12 the year before, and so right now it's up in the air because it hasn't happened yet. Once it happens, I think you see it kind of fix itself too.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think I think what I am the most, uh, I guess, upset about, or that I'm the most down on with this whole thing is that college football started as a regional sport. Like, the
Mhm.
Southwest Conference existed for so long, and it was basically like all the Texas schools playing each other. And I get, in today's world that wouldn't make a whole lot of money, but like take for example, if Oregon and Washington do get accepted, by the Big Ten or end up in some other big conference, and they leave behind their counterparts, their rivals, Washington State and Oregon State, those rivalry games are never going to be competitive ever again. Like it
Mhm.
may as well be two different levels of football. Like you're going to have the Super League level where all the money and talent is, and the cast-off level with Washington State and Oregon State, and it's going to be unrecognizable. Like when if they even still play that game, uh, Oregon's going to beat the mess out of Oregon State every year. Like they're going to have way more money and they're going to have way better players, and they have better players now, but Oregon State still beats them on a not that you know irregular basis. I just hate that like that rivalry game is going to mean a whole lot less in the future, and I don't know that 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 what's the word for it? It rubs me the wrong way. Is what it does. Like
Mhm.
losing that regionality and those kind of rivalries, and we haven't played Oklahoma and Nebraska. They took like a 10-year break, and that was a big rivalry for a long time. So I don't know. Like maybe it's not a big deal, but I don't know. Stuff like little things like that kind of don't sit well with me.
You're right, but I'm also going to continue to play the devil's advocate with you. Everybody said this about A&M too when we moved to the SEC. You know, we broke apart what was left of the Southwest Conference. We left Texas behind and stopped that rivalry game, which was one of the biggest in the nation, and and we broke it all apart to go play with Alabama and these other teams that we've never traditionally played. Um, of course, it did wonders for our school, but now there's a new set of rivalry games amongst A&M. You know, like uh, I know that South Carolina is supposed to be our rival, but I feel like Mississippi State is more of a rival for us because they have our number in a lot of ways, and um, who's we're playing for whose maroon is the real maroon, and um, there's there's some good that will come from it. Um, but again, I think that us or these teams moving around the way that they are, I just don't think that UCLA and USC moving to the Big Ten was too calculated of a move. I think it might have been um, a save our ship kind of thing. Are they going to benefit from it? Yeah. Are other teams going to struggle because of it? Yeah. Look at the Big 12 since we have left the Big 12. And I'll be the first one to say too, we weren't the big guns in the Big 12 either. If UT would have left instead of A&M, it would have had a bigger impact on the Big 12. But just us leaving had a pretty big impact on the conference. So uh, Is it going to have an impact on the conference? Yes, but I do think that college football is going to continue to evolve, and new rivalries will emerge, which then I think you'll start to see new conferences emerge too. I mean, ask people about the good old days. The Big Eight, it used to be the biggest thing in college football, right? Once upon a time, the Big 12 was the biggest conference. The SEC is currently. The Big 10 has been in the past. It's for a while the Pac was too. ACC used to be crazy good. So I don't think that all the realignment necessarily means that all these other teams are going to go by the wayside, but they got to figure something out,
Yeah.
and that's the problem. I think the problem isn't necessarily that these two teams are moving. I think it's more that all the conferences are scrambling.
Yeah.
Y'all don't need to be scrambling. You need to be just trying to figure out what's best for the conference and all of that. And again, I think it just is bad timing because NIL's the same way, and so everybody's just scrambling to figure out all these new rules and where there isn't any rules.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about NIL. Um, I think that's kind of the equalizer here. Like I think about a team like Miami, who, if you look at the recruiting commit list, is doing quite well with NIL right now. Um, they're not in one of these two super leagues. They're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, and they probably won't be unless like mass realignment happens with 24 team super conferences. And
Mhm.
as long as that doesn't happen, as long as they're still in the ACC, they're going to get way less TV money than SEC and Big Ten schools will. But what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things? Like that's what it's all about. Like this whole conversation is about TV money. If
Mhm.
if that doesn't matter as much, if they can still, for lack of a better term, if they can still pay their players and bring in good players, it doesn't matter if they're not in one of the big leagues. If like the playoff is going to expand, I don't know to what effect. I don't know to what, if there's going to be automatic qualifiers, but even if you're not in one of the big leagues, if you still have a alumni base that cares and wants to, give a lot of money, you can still be competitive. You can still get players and field good football teams.
Sure. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say. Alante made a comment about there's nothing quite like A&M and UT playing on Thanksgiving Day. You're right. Like that rivalry, I hated that it was broken up. In fact, a quick little anecdotal story. Whenever that happened, I was a student senator at A&M, and my cousin was at UT, and we created two, like, she did more of it than I actually did, but two, like, organizations to try and force the two teams to play by passing legislation at both schools. We really thought that we
I
could
remember that.
we could really do something, um, but I don't. That's what I don't want to see is rivalries being broken up. Of course, it's happening, but if it's a smaller scale rivalry, let's say it's the Longhorns and Baylor, that's a pretty good rivalry, but it really is only a rivalry because it's a regional thing.
Yeah.
Um, it's not a rivalry quite like the Longhorns and the Sooners. It's not a rivalry like uh, Ohio State and Michigan. So those are going to get broken up, and there's going to be some that emerge later on to replace those. But the Oregon State, really any state schools, right? That Auburn, Alabama, and Florida State, those rivalries I just don't want to see change. But
Yeah.
they're changing.
Like is that a Sam Cooke song? The times they are changing.
The times they are changing.
Or I'm thinking of a change gonna come. That's what I'm trying to
You're
think of.
thinking of change gonna come. That
Yeah.
that's that's the Sam Cooke song. The
Yeah.
times they are a changing. I think that might be. Hmm.
It was the worst of times. It was the worst of times.
I can't think of who's saying the times they are a changing. Simon and Garfunkel, maybe. That's gonna bug me, so I'm gonna Google it while
I've
we're
got it. That's
on.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, that's who it was.
Yeah. Thanks, Google. Um, any other big points? I did want to make my relegation spiel on my soapbox.
Yeah, go for it, because I haven't really fully heard your thoughts on it. I mean, you've talked about it at length before, but I don't know that I've really truly heard your organic. Here's my thinking on
Yeah.
relegation. You know.
So I don't want to take credit because it's definitely not my idea by any means. It's been going on in other sports for a long time, but um, it was first brought to my attention by Bill Connolly, who now writes for ESPN. He's been banging this drum for a long time because it's what they do in English soccer, which I know Americans, especially college football fans, probably don't give a crap about soccer, and that's fair. But the Premier League is the most watched sports league in the country, and it wasn't always that way. It wasn't until they kind of tweaked some things that it got to the level that it is. Um, but basically, in the Premier League, it's a 20-team league, and it's all of the it started off as all the top English clubs, on the top soccer clubs. But if you like, they take the bottom three teams. I'm simplifying this for the sake of brevity, but basically the bottom three teams will get relegated to this other league called the Champions League, which is of a tier lower than the Premier League. The top three from the Champions League will move up, and it goes back and forth, and teams will go down and come back up, and if you do get relegated to the lesser league, you still get some of your money from the Premier League's TV deals. So you're not just kind of on your own and making a lot less money immediately. You still get a little bit of like a parachute fund. Um, but what I thought was interesting was in 25 years that they've been doing that, uh, the six like most successful teams, or like biggest name teams, have never been relegated. Like Manchester United, Everton, Chelsea, Liverpool, like those teams that everyone kind of knows, even if you don't know soccer, they've always been in the Premier League. They've never gotten relegated. So I was making the point to Chase last night. I was like, this would benefit, or not, uh, there wouldn't be a reason for the bigger schools to be against this because, Alabama will probably never get relegated. Ohio State and, I would say Michigan, but they actually might. But Ohio State, Georgia, like teams like that, are like Oklahoma in the Big 12. Like they're never getting last place in the conference and getting booted down to the next level. But to tie it into college football, like they've tried to make these two leagues with these premier brands, but you still have teams like Rutgers and Illinois and Vanderbilt and South Carolina. Sorry, South Carolina, but it's what it is. So if the leaders of these conferences want the best teams, you could do something like that. Like, hey, if you're last place in the SEC this year, you have to go play a bowl game against the winner of the American, and if you lose, they take your spot. You have to go to the American next year. We'll still give you some of your money, not all of it, but you'll get a little bit, so you don't fall flat on your face. And if you're good enough and you go win that league, you can come back. It's that's kind of the short version of it. But um, what I like the most is that it rewards teams that care. Like it's pretty obvious that Kansas does not care about football. Like they're a basketball school, and with relegation, they would have been kicked out a long time ago. And somebody like SMU would be in the Big 12 by now because they actually invest in their program. So I think that's my biggest point is the fan bases that care, the schools that care, and want to be good at football and have the level of commitment. If you saw on Twitter last week, Texas Tech just announced like $200 million in renovations to their stadium. Like they care, that's obvious. But I don't want those schools to be left out. There needs to be a way for them to, if we go to the Super League model, there needs to be a way to bring other teams in that care and can get to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I get the concept. I don't know that I could get behind it personally. There's just so much that would go into that. Just from, let's say, this would, I'm assuming, mean that football has separated itself from all the other sports.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It would be football only.
but then that gets convoluted in terms of, in my opinion, that would hurt recruiting for other sports. If the you don't have that football tie in there, um, and but my problem when it comes to football and relegation is, how many games do they play in the Premier League? I think it's like 38, 40, something like that.
Oh yeah.
Um,
The season's like 8 months long.
right. They play a bunch of games, and they'll play smaller tier games, so they might not be relegated, but they might play their um, rookies or something in a game, that's with the another Champions League team,
I think
and
they
all that.
also
There's
I think they also loan players like
They
to certain
do,
teams.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they do, and so um, it's when you're dealing with 12 games in a season. I mean, like, how do you determine who was last in the SEC this year? I'm sure Vanderbilt was, but who was
Yeah.
last in the SEC West? Was it Arkansas?
I think it was Auburn.
Was it Auburn?
Yeah.
But are either of those teams so bad that they should be in a
So
different league? I wouldn't think so.
yeah. So I did this exercise going back to like 2017. I think I don't have my spreadsheet pulled up, but um, what's funny was like in the Big 12, for example, um, like obviously Kansas was immediately relegated. Like they're the worst team every year. But um, after that, like none of the other current teams ever got relegated. It was always like I think they were matched up with Conference USA. So like one year, like so the first year Kansas goes down and Florida Atlantic comes up. Well, the next year they're bad, so Florida Atlantic gets booted, and then UAB comes up, and like they just kind of recycle teams. But then in the Pac-12, like uh, there's a current Pac-12 member that got relegated every year. Like it was like Oregon State and then Colorado and then Stanford. Like they all got booted, and then like you bring in Boise State, San Diego State, and Air Force, I think. But um, I actually had trouble with the most recent SEC because um, obviously Vanderbilt was long gone, and I had brought in like App State. Um, yeah, sorry, I just saw Lante's comment. And in the model that Bill Connolly proposed, they would actually play that team. Like, say if
Mhm.
Vanderbilt or say if Auburn was, the one to get kicked out, they would have to play, you know, UCF or Houston or whoever was coming up from the other league. If they lost the game, then they get relegated. If they win, then they get to keep their spot.
Yeah, I get that, but that's a lot riding on that one game, and I guess the point that I was trying to make was, if you were going to do relegation for football, I don't think you could base it off of one season. I don't think you could do it every season. I think
Right.
you would have to do it every 4 years. Then there's a sorry, something just fell on me. I don't know what it was,
Yeah.
but um, you'd have to you'd have to I would think you would have to do multiple seasons to get enough data points. Because I mean, what about a team that's on the verge but they're rebuilding? The other thing comes into recruiting, especially now that NIL's involved. You recruit a kid to come in to play for your school, and then now you get relegated with free agency in college football where they can just transfer wherever they want to.
Right.
Everybody's going to transfer. They're all
Yeah.
just going to leave your school, and so um, I get the concept, and if you could put it in a way that I just don't see it ever happening. Quite frankly, I just
It's
don't think that they could ever make that happen because there's too many people at stake. There's too much money at stake, and quite frankly, if you did it, it just becomes an amateur sports team. It's gonna really have nothing to do with the college at all at that point.
Well, I think we may end up there anyway. But I was going to
Yeah.
make the joke that this is really just my conspiracy to get App State into the SEC.
Or Tulane, bring them back.
Yeah, Tulane or what's that one college that like the College of the South or whatever?
Our
Is
Lady
it?
of the Lakes University.
No, it's not the. It was I think it's Sewanee. I think it's the University of Sewanee. It's in Georgia. They were like founding SEC member, but then they didn't care about football, and they. Sorry, this is way off topic, but I heard this the other day, so I've got to bring it up. Whenever Sewanee wanted to leave the SEC, it was because in like 10 years they won like 2 SEC games, and of their losses, like a large number of their losses were shutouts. Like they were just getting blasted every single year by the SEC, and they were like, you know what, we're done with this football thing. Um, but I mean, my last little spiel on relegation is it would probably level out after the first couple of years. Like you would get rid of Kansas and Rutgers and Vanderbilt, and then it would probably stay the same for the most part. You know, like you wouldn't see like Florida get relegated or Penn State or something like that. At least you probably wouldn't. But Illinois, Rutgers. Yeah, sorry, you're my punching bags today, but I don't know they're always bad. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
but on the other hand, what I've heard people talk about with the new Big Ten and in the SEC is you need teams that'll take L's. You know, like you don't want Penn State doesn't want to go 6-6 every year, having to play Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. They want to play Illinois. They want to play Rutgers and Maryland. Everybody wants to play Vanderbilt. You know, like they want that automatic dub.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's interesting times. But I think everything that we just said today could change tomorrow. You know, if they announce something
Good.
else, like you never really know with this sport. But I don't know. That's all I've got to say about it as it stands today.
Yeah, I just there's a lot that needs to be done. There, like I said, two of the biggest changes in college football are coming at one time,
Yeah.
and we need to figure it out because they're both based around money. And if it's not drawn in a little bit, then it might just completely dissolve the sport for a bit, and not to the degree like I don't think it's going away completely. It's just it's going to change drastically, and maybe it's for the good, but honestly, I don't know how to fix it. I really don't. I mean, relegation, I get the concept, I get the idea. I don't particularly like it, but I also like could see, okay, well, yeah, maybe you could do it this way or that way, what have you.
It also it made a lot more sense before this most recent realignment. Like back when
Sure.
USC and UCLA were still out west and Oklahoma and Texas were still in the Big 12. It made a lot more sense then. But now, like things are scattering so much, and like like the dust still hasn't settled on realignment. I saw today I was going to bring this up that the Division I Council recommended getting rid of the one-time transfer rule and letting people transfer as many times as you want to, which I like the one time. I like, hey, like came to a bad situation or my coach left, I'm going to get out of here and go somewhere else, or maybe I'm getting a better deal somewhere else, something like that. But are we just going to have free agency every single year? Every player can go wherever they want to. Like even in the NFL, you have contracts. Like you can't just be like, oh, I want to be in Cincinnati this year and Dallas next year and then Tampa the next. Like you can't do that. And
yeah, I mean, it's not good for the. Again, every single thing that comes about like this, it just brings us one step closer to an amateur league or a semi-pro league, I guess I should say. It's supposed to be amateur right now, but we're paying them now, or paying them legally now. We're I'm not saying they're bad things, but it's just the more that it gets put in there, the more that's like that, because at the end of the day, it is supposed to be a student athlete, right? You're supposed to be student and an athlete.
Yeah.
These sports came about because it was people going to the school that cared about the school, that were good at sports, so they were representing their school. It's just constantly getting further and further away from that, to where if you get to where you're transferring to a different college every semester, you clearly aren't worried about the kids' academics. You clearly aren't trying to do what's best for the kid and their, you know, their pathway as a student. You're just worried about the sport itself, and I mean, that's always been the tug of war relationship between school and sports, right? But
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I don't want I don't want the I don't think I would enjoy college football if the school got too distanced to where it's really just kind of a pro team that kind of represents your school, but it's not really, and the students there, and that kind of stuff.
Well, and luckily, like everything in this world comes down to money, especially in this sport comes down to money. Um, but it only makes money if people watch it. You know, if
Hmm.
if it if it goes the way you're saying, and if we feel the way that we're saying, and we stop watching, uh, then they're gonna be like, "Oh crap, we screwed up." Like, put everything back the way it was, and and stop doing this. Because
Well,
then like what if you try to if you turn this into the next XFL and everybody's like, "Yeah, we don't really want that. We liked it the way it was." And
that's exactly what I was going to say, is how many amateur leagues do you have to see fail before you figure out that, hey, we it probably isn't working. We're very successful with what we have here, and we should keep it intact and not try to emulate the XFL or some of those. I mean, every time one of those comes about, they might make it a year, maybe two.
yeah,
So I don't know.
it's unfair to college football fans that they get punished for liking their sport so much. like like college football makes money because it's popular, because people like it, but it's ruined because it makes too much money.
Right?
Like
Yeah,
it's a weird conundrum to be in. But
yeah.
um, like you said, like we don't have the answers. We're here to just talk about it, and uh, just kind of make our way through it as fans. But um, for the time being, I'm going to keep watching. A&M's going to win the title before you know it. So that's my focus right now.
Hopefully we win the title with, like, the old way of doing it.
Yeah,
Before all the teams move their conferences, they just, well, everybody's still where they're at. I'm talking about this year, in
yeah,
particular.
yeah. Like before, there's a expanded playoff. Like, oh yeah, we made the 4 team and we won it. So
Yeah, yeah.
take that.
Um, uh,
Well, if you're watching me on video, you can tell the sun is starting to set because my screen is getting brighter and brighter on my glasses. So I think we're gonna call it a show, and I'm gonna go eat
yeah.
some meatballs.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go eat pork chops.
I think our meatballs are pork. They're Mr.
Probably
Pork and
so.
Beef. So shout out to all the pig farmers.
uh,
All right. Well, actually,
love
I
it.
did want to point out that we're gonna be back on Saturday.
Saturday
Saturday,
morning.
Saturday morning. And what
Yeah.
are we gonna
Well,
talk about?
hmm, I don't know. Why
We
don't
doing
we just do
quarterbacks?
quarterbacks? We might as
Yeah,
well do that.
let's do quarterbacks.
Okay.
So Saturday morning, if you want to wake up at not that early, maybe like 8 or 9,
Yeah.
we're probably gonna be right back here talking about the A&M quarterback situation.
Yeah, and we may end up getting all excited and doing more than one position. We'll see.
Yep.
Uh, hey, Lante, thanks for joining us, my friend.
Appreciate it, Alante.
I hope to see you in person before too long. It's been a little bit, but I always enjoy your comments and you joining the show. It makes it a lot more fun. I'm glad that we've moved to this this format, because although I really enjoyed recording these podcasts with you, Will, and it was just the two of us, it is nice to see, our friends engaging and being there alongside us. So
Yeah.
it's been fun.
The only downside is a lot more pressure to like look presentable. I can't be in here with like disheveled hair and a hoodie on. Like I have to look decent on
Yeah.
camera.
Yeah, you can't wear that Aggies hoodie that you wore almost every episode last season.
Yeah, yeah, and it's probably gonna come back soon when it gets a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
cooler outside.
Oh, for
But
sure. No, that
uh,
one looks nice enough anyways. But uh,
but appreciate y'all as always, and we'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.